Yeah. Yeah, well, I want to take a bit of a step back
Okay.
and just have a bit of a discussion of, where you think maybe gear's going and, the equipment shape. Do you think the materials will? Because obviously, from even when I was a kid in the 90s to now, the gear has changed so dramatically. And I feel like every decade sort of has a new face to gear. So where do you think going into the next decade, maybe some projections of where you see gear heading in terms of material and shape?
In terms of material and shape, um, I think
Or anything else that you might think.
yeah. So in terms of material, yeah, I think that it's amazing and how the construction of the gear has changed so much, even just generationally. You know, Glenn Hall used to wear when he was playing with the St. Louis Blues wore literally a Stan Musial first baseman's glove with a cuff sewn on it, and we're talking, this was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And you look at that versus where we are today, and it's incomprehensible how far we've advanced. Um, I think that, but even today, and it was only a few years ago that pads were still basically Gen Pro and foam sewn together, and some plastic for the gloves and the blocker. Throw some leather straps on it, you call it a day. That is all going by the wayside. Is becoming very, very obvious. The
Yeah.
technology that the companies are putting in there in terms of the interior foams. I think the big innovation that Bauer made when they came through their Odin project, was to develop this core tech technology, and saying, okay, Gen Pro is gone. We are now using a material that we believe slides better, has a firmer face that we can print on, and actually print the imaging into the material, which has a completely changed custom graphics.
Totally.
I think that was, again, being way ahead of their time and a harbinger of things to come, because then you all of a sudden immediately started seeing these companies trying to get their own proprietary kind of
Yeah.
weaves and other. You got Speed Skin isn't a weave, but CCM has got Speed Skin. Brian's has Primo, which is somewhat similar to a weave, but it's its own material. And all these companies, Vaughn has one that name's escaping me.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of going to that. So I think you have that. I think that in terms of shape, again, looking at how the gear has changed, or how the position has changed because of the gear, and how the changes in the gear have allowed the changing of the position. So once you put knee blocks into pads, you allowed goalies to not only drop in the butterfly, but all of a sudden butterfly slides could happen. And
Mm.
that is now an integral part of the game. And so now you have people like Warrior who looked at the knee block and that section of the pad that is meeting the ice, and the calf wing, and things like those areas, and started developing their own unique shapes. They actually kind of beveled out. You ever look at the G5s, the
Yeah.
G4s, or the G4s, I believe. They actually beveled out the knee block area, and the calf area, and I'm trying to remember the name. It's just escaping me right now. And you now see
Mhm.
it again with their air slide. That's it. You now see it
Nice.
with their G5. So I mean, I think that's the kind of level of thinking you should expect, and kind of these fundamental differences and changes. In
Yeah.
terms of the experience, though, I think the biggest, most obvious thing we're going to see in terms of just the goalie gear experience is going to probably also at the retail level. I think that just
Like,
because of, in general, brick and mortar stores, just because of just the way the world is today, and just the way people shop differently,
yeah.
the brick and mortar stores are becoming less prevalent. But for goalie, even more specifically than generally in hockey gear, it's a huge investment for retail stores to have to purchase so much inventory upfront, and
Yeah.
so they can have it on their shelves, so that when little Susie needs a new set of pads, you hope that you have the right size and right colorway there, and that's tough. And it requires a tremendous investment, and knowing that, okay, well, 30% of this in 2 years is not going to sell, or whatever that number
Yeah.
is. And we're going to have to turn around, and we're going to have to then, you know, sell at a discount.
Salvage. Yeah.
It puts a lot of pressure on them. So I think that experience is going to change. I think you're starting to see some retailers do it. I think that with the amount of customization that is possible now with gear, I think it is going to be less about Susie going to the store and saying, great, they have a set of my size pads in my colorway. here, I think it's going to be much more about, okay, this is the company I want, because this has the specs I want, and I'm going to be able to order this colorway and change this one little spec this way, and it's going to arrive at my door in,
Mhm.
8 weeks for Bauer. I think they're going to trim. I think companies, and I'm this is maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years down the road, they're going to optimize their processes enough that they're going to trim that window
Yeah,
down. Where you're like, look, in 2 weeks you're going to have that, and it's
that's
going
the
to be your own
hope.
custom graphic, your name into it, and everything, and that's going to keep that inventory, from that reseller from having to carry that inventory, and it's going to
Yeah,
be allow for even more personalized experience for the client.
yeah. No, I think about that too. I'm like, because I think like Vaughn at one point, like last, they're like, yeah, I went in and they were like, yeah, anything Vaughn, they're like at least 14 weeks. I'm like,
And that's still short. I mean, I know other companies have gone well north of that.
oh
That's
wow,
tough. Yeah.
wow. Well, I have this thing in my head, and I just wanted to run it by you, but
Mhm.
a part of the gear that I still feel like, we talk about the helmet and all these other things, but is for me, it's sort of the gloves. Is
Yeah.
that we still are in this awkward fan your wrists out and fan your wrists down glove wrist position. And from just from my own playing experience, I'm noticing a lot more goalies are going toward a more of what we call a neutral wrist position, and I'm just curious if you ever think that maybe they'll change the shape of the glove or something like that to to promote a more neutral wrist position within goalies so you don't have that awkwardness.
It's interesting because, yeah, when Lefevre and other French Canadian gear makers, I'm thinking of like Passo and others, when they were coming up with the gloves really initially in 20-ish years ago, they tended to make gloves that had a 90-degree break closure. So like the equivalent in CCM lexicon, like a 580. And the logic was, okay, you're gonna be dropping a butterfly, and you're gonna be catching the puck over your pad, and try to make a shape that's conducive kind of to that motion to the side of your body. And then as goalies started rotating their hands more upward, as you said, they people started to really prefer a more, you almost were holding your glove like a first baseman, and so you started seeing goalies that were saying, "I like a more baseball glove style feel." So like a 60-degree type closure, the 590 again in CCM, the Vapor in Bauer, etc. And that became very very prevalent. And then you found some more guys that were kind of in the middle with a 75-degree. And so Ken, does hand position, how you catch the puck, can it be affected by, your hand placement, things like that? Yeah, I think so. Now, where my that whole theory that I just said completely seems to be going sideways is how the popularity of the CCM 580 has been as of late. It wasn't until recently I started appreciating how many pros have gone to the 580.
Yeah.
You've got Binnington, you've Holtby, Markstrom, Bobrovsky. These guys are really rattling off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And it's actually become much more popular. I actually got a 580 this year for my Axis. The stock is a 590, but I was like, I want to try. And so does, and I kind of hold mine a little bit more up, kind of a la Binnington, which theoretically, with what I was saying, should be more of a 60-degree kind of, but I think goalies, it's about, where you're kind of catching the puck in the air, and things like that. I always say though, the what will happen, what I'm hoping happens, and what naturally will happen is, as goalie coaches, yeah, as experts like you that are teaching, goalies, about the position and things like that, as you all start really helping goalies find a more natural hand position that makes sense from a technical perspective, the gear will get there because goalies will find a glove that works for them when using that correct technique, and they stop thinking about that glove. The second they stop thinking about it, once it becomes a tool that they don't think about, then that's it. That's when you found the right one, and that's when that that'll become the more common one. So yeah,
Yeah.
glove breaks are a big kind of weird topic.
Oh man, I had the worst nightmares in college with glove breaks. Like
Really.
I got like they're like I had a 580, and then I wanted to get like I got the premier I think it was the one, uh, or something. I can't even remember what it was, what I had in college. It was like what Corey Crawford had. What? Wasn't that Premier?
Yeah, you talking
Uh,
about the P2s?
yeah, the
Okay,
P2s. That's what they were. Excuse me,
okay.
excuse me. Um, they're like, yeah, we can put the P2 on, like the graphic on this model. And basically, I went from a 580 to 600, and I didn't realize it until like the season was over, and every single puck I caught went off of my thumb and almost broke my hand in half. Uh, but I haven't gotten back to a 580. And when I was in juniors and we had like a really successful season, that was the glove I had, and it felt so comfortable. And I still haven't gone back to that. It was a shame that Bauer didn't have it. But
Yeah. Yeah, I will say I had this discussion with another group of goalies, and they all work at Pro Skate, and they asked, what are you testing right now? And they asked me what model CCM I got. I mentioned that I got a 580, and they were just ecstatic, like, yes, that's the best one, which is hysterical. But I told them, I said, I love it. It's great. I said, but I will say the ultrasonic, the glove, the trapper this year is absolute butter. It is the best glove Bauer has made by far. I thought I love the vapor and all. I just fell madly in love with the ultrasonic. I didn't have to break it in, and it's like a 75-ish degree glove, so you would think more like a 600. But the feel of that glove and the closure is
really,
so phenomenal. It is unreal. But I will say, I having, and now I'm kind of, like I said, testing more of the 580. And I'm going, oh, why on earth did I wait like 7 some odd years to try one of these again? So definitely worth trying out again, because I'm watching. I always say pros, like I said, are a lagging indicator on
yeah,
where gear is going. But the fact that I'm like, well, hold on, how is that? How is the prevalence of it becoming increasing? Like, what's the underlying
growing.
reason? And I kind of put it on. I went, oh, yep, yep, yep. Now it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, before we get out of here, I
Mhm.
know you got a jet, but I'm just curious what your biggest gear hack is to date, that can help people with their performance.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that a couple things. Definitely in terms of um, the people that are still using like skate lace toe ties, and so toe ties are interesting. And it might be the same as yours. But toe ties are interesting in the sense that I think people now know you don't tie your toe ties super tight. But the problem you always run into, it's just like we are talking about earlier, kind of this dual mandate. You tie your skate lace toe ties super tight, pad's going to respond really well. You point your toe, you skate, the pad's going to come with you. There's going to be no lag. But you
Yeah,
try to butterfly, and it's going to put a lot of strain on your ankle. It's going to put a lot of strain on your knee.
totally.
They put a lot of slack in there. All of a sudden, you're dragging the pad around with you. You're not getting the response, but you're not getting that pressure, which is the trade off. Elastic toe ties are huge. And again, this is actually a data point. Again, boy, am I a nerd? This actually is a data point that I track at the pro level.
Nice.
And again, lagging indicator. But that you can clearly see them really adopting it. There is a huge cottage industry of companies that are now offering elastic toe ties. And what was interesting, I want to say it was, oh boy, was it last year or this year? I think it might have been last year, was the first year that all of the companies, in fact, I think it was last year, all of the companies now, as a stock toe option, it was elastic. It was
Yeah,
so that was very, very, very interesting, because they again usually did laces as an option, with an elastic option. I think that's number one. And then number two is, I think, strapping. I think people don't take it seriously enough. I think that people. I have a whole thing on my um, page about what is the differences in strapping and how that affects things, and how it affects pads. If you take your elastic for your knee and go across, you go down to your calf. How does that change things? I think people are starting to really see the value of that. And
yeah,
I am always telling people, play around with that. Definitely go there. And then it's like a true hack. And I actually have a Goalie Gear Nerd hacks section
nice.
on my site, is about breaking in gloves. People still, their darn trappers are not broken in, and they can't
Yeah,
catch a puck. And there's my version's a little bit different. It's I think it's a little bit it's easier in some ways, but essentially involves either a traditional or a skate oven, using a warm washcloth, putting it in there, and then actually taking some clamps and actually compressing it closed. And you can actually
Mm,
do that over and over and over again. And you can actually do the compression piece again after every time you get off the ice, and it creates a real nice seam in the foam, which helps with the closure.
mm,
And that's something that I'm, again, probably one of the most common questions I get during Q&As is, how do I break in my glove? And so that I lay that on the site as a very specific process that
yeah.
I typically recommend.
Or you use blood, sweat, and tears, baby, like
That's
old
right.
school, you know?
That's right. I guess for guys like with weak forearms, for me, I didn't have the hand strength, so I had to come up with something, some other kind of cheat.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Just quick question before we head out.
Mhm.
The elastic toe tie thing,
Yeah.
do you think that there's like a loss of power from that? Like when you're pushing against it, it's sort of giving a bit. So do you think that affects performance at all?
Yeah. And again, it's definitely a balance because I think that there's something to be said for a static lace, like a skate lace.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna get, you talked about earlier, from a physics perspective, you're going to not lose any force when you do that. The problem you run into again, though, is that you, with that lack of elasticity, you're putting pressure on the joints and the ankles and things like that. So it is definitely a trade off. I think that elastics, if you're someone who is willing to put, you had Bobrovsky up until recently, just like, I forgot how many knots into his toe tie
Yeah.
to get his skate all the way down to the ice. It was like, well, the pad is just swinging around, like it's almost ridiculous even having a toe tie at this point. The elastic is to say, okay, well, let's give it a little bit more responsiveness than
Right.
a ridiculous amounts of knots. If it's really about responsiveness, yeah, I mean, it's laces and shorter knots will definitely get you there.
Yeah. Well, buddy, you have any last words of advice? I know it's been a long one, but that you feel passionate about sharing.
No, I really, one, first and foremost, I'm grateful that we live in this time, right? Because as I said, when I was growing up, we only had, the hockey catalogs, and the goalie coaches that I had were the week during the summer that I got to go to a goalie camp. Is when I could be around just goalies and actually learn a bit about technique. So I'm grateful that there's people like you that are doing what you do, and that we have these resources that are out there. So I am extremely appreciative for to anyone that is interested in what I'm doing. I certainly am extremely appreciative of the fact that you'd have me on today. In terms of advice and gear stuff, keep trying stuff out. Don't be afraid. Don't be, just because you heard someone had some experience with certain brand or what have you. Don't give up on that. Try new stuff again whenever possible. Do your research. Don't listen to one person, and try to find, hopefully, an informed voice out there, because there's a lot of people that think they know what they're talking about that don't. So definitely go out
Yeah.
there and try to get a lot of different opinions, and hopefully a couple of informed ones too, when making your decisions, and try new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate the kind words, and I love that we finally got a gear segment in such a sick episode, getting your personal expertise insight, into the status of goaltending gear and what's better out there than having you on, the king of goalie gear. So can you just let my audience know where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure. So Instagram and Twitter is at Goalie Gear Nerd. And then goaliegearnerd.com is the .com. And again, we're going to be putting a lot more content on the website, 'cause that's only about 6 months old. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have on Instagram and Twitter. And I can be reached at goaliegearnerd@gmail.com if you want to speak to me directly.
Yeah. Well, go check out GGN. He's been a leader in the gear space, for in the gear review space for years now, and I know he'll continue to provide the goalie community with tons of gear insights. Like you alluded to, everybody stays in their lane, and it's all free info online that helps people get better, right? But maybe somewhere down the road we'll have you back on the show if that interests you, man.
Absolutely. Would love to come back.
All right, man. Well, I'm grateful for you coming on, buddy. Stay safe. Take care. We'll chat soon, man.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode, guys. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we have tons of amazing guests lined up ready to come onto the show in the next few months. Make sure to tune in next week and every Tuesday from now on at 8 a.m. as I have the owner and creator of the famous Vector Ball and 20-year Special Forces veteran John Lindsay coming on the show next week. We dive deep into military and special forces training and how exactly to unlock the power of your mind. I love this conversation we had, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it, so make sure to tune back next week. Without further ado, here are the giveaway details for the NeuroTracker X subscriptions we're giving away every week. And to enter the giveaway, if you're an Apple user, simply go to the Apple Podcast app on your phone and leave us a written review and rating. And if you're an Android user, you can also download iTunes onto your computer and leave a review and rating on there as well. And once you leave a review of the podcast, take a screenshot of it and either email it to goaliehacks@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram with your screenshot and your full name. If you guys are also interested in getting started with the product, feel free to hit me up either by email or on Instagram, direct messages to get more details. Get excited, guys. Great things ahead. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and I'll see you next week.